Hey everyone, in this video we're going to take a look at how to generate and send out personalized videos using Sendinblue. There will be three sections that we'll cover. First, we're going to look at Sendinblue. We'll create some custom fields and then we're going to construct an email. And then we jump over to Cine-Q to set up a trigger campaign as well as the integration. And then finally, we're going to go back to Sendinblue and create automations as well as new contacts to test the end-to-end process. So let's go over to Sendinblue and take a look at where to create custom fields. So when you click on Contacts and then click on Settings, you will see a module called Contact Attribute CRM. And when you click on Configure, then you will see the list of attributes. And on the bottom, you can see an Add New Attribute button, which enables you to create the new attributes. You can give it a name and select the type and then click OK. Now, we are not going to create new attributes as we already have a few created for this particular demonstration, but this is where you create the new attribute. Now let's have a look at where and how to set up an email itself. So when we go over to campaigns, we can click on templates, and this is where we can click on new template on the upper right to create a new template. We already have a template for this demonstration, so we're not going to create another one. But if we look at setup, we can see that this is where you can give a template name, the subject line, you can set the from email and the from name and a bunch of other attributes. If we go over to design and we go into edit mode, then we can have a look at how the email template is constructed. As we can see, it's a very basic email. We just have an image on the top, some text over here, and then an image in here. Now, this is an important part that I wanted to call out. So when we click on it, we can see that the image has a hyperlink behind it, and it's pulling data from the Cine-Q PURL custom field that we created, or custom attribute that we created earlier. So this is very important because this field is going to be populated by a Cine-Q trigger campaign, and it will contain the personalized URL that will take the viewer to a Cine-Q landing page where they can watch the video that we produce. So this is where you can set up an email template. So let's go over to Cine-Q now and take a look at how to set up the campaign itself, the trigger campaign. So if we go into campaigns, click on campaign, and we have a Sendinblue campaign already in here. What I wanted to call out is the segment. Over here, we have a custom field called Cine-Q Camp Trigger, and the filter is that it has to be send me Sendinblue demo. Now, this is very important. We'll come back to this when we go over to Sendinblue and set up the automation. And we have a couple of other filters in here. We're just making sure that the same campaign member is not going through the campaign multiple times. The message has also been created. If we look at the personalization, we can see that it's a very basic video that we have. It's an insurance renewal letter, and we can see that it has been personalized. We're addressing the viewer by their name, and we're also using a custom field called temp date 01 to indicate the renewal date for the viewer. So this is where the campaign, and this is how the campaign is being set up in Cine-Q and the personalized video. Now, if we go over to execution, this is where we need to go click on schedule and then turn it into a trigger-based campaign. So we set a date sometime in the past because we want to kick off this trigger-based campaign immediately. But if you want to start this trigger-based campaign sometime in the future, then obviously you would just set a date sometime in the future. And we do want to run this campaign based on Sydney time zone, and we want to run it till, let's just set it for in the future, so that because we don't know when we want to stop this campaign. So let's click on create, and now this campaign is basically set up as a trigger campaign. And the next thing we need to do is we need to set up the integration itself. So the integration is under data integrations, and we need to click on integrations, and we need to find Sendinblue and click on create. So over here we can see that currently we have an orange circle that's indicating that this particular integration hasn't been set up yet. So when we click on this settings button, we can immediately see that the name has been given as Sendinblue, but we can change it if we wanted to, and the status is not connected. We do need to get the API key from Sendinblue and the list ID. So let's go over to Sendinblue and get the API key. So in order to get the API key, we need to go over here on the upper right corner and click on SMTP and API. And this is where we can find our API key. So let's just copy it. I'm copying the version 3 because we do want to use the latest one. And we're just going to paste it in here. And we do need to find the list ID. So that might be a little bit tricky for some users, but essentially what we need to do is we need to go to contacts and click on list. And this is where we can see the list ID. So it's number 4 that we need to put in here. And then click on test connection. And we can see that the connection is successful. So let's click on save. This will turn that orange into green, but it doesn't mean that it has been configured properly. What it indicates is that the connection is now successful. So under integrations, there are 2 parts that we need to set up. First, we need to look at and configure the get member data. So we need to do the field mapping for the part where we're pulling data from Sendinblue into Cine-Q. And then we're going to configure the push member data, which is pushing data from Cine-Q into Sendinblue. So let's configure the get member data first. As we can see, the webhook URL is currently not available because it hasn't, the integration hasn't been configured properly yet. So we do want to enable this schedule. When you set up an integration in Cine-Q, you can always disable a schedule. If you, for some reason, you want to pause the integration, you don't have to delete it and then recreate it later on. And we want to run this at, let's say, midnight Sydney time every single day. So what it means is that this integration will pull the Sendinblue data into Cine-Q every single day at midnight, Sydney, based on Sydney time zone. And the unique identifier in Sendinblue, we can assume that we can use email. So that's what we're going to set up in here. And we do want to update existing Cine-Q data. So when there are changes in Sendinblue to one of the contacts, then those changes will be reflected in Cine-Q. So over here, we have 2 columns. The first one is listing all the fields in Sendinblue that we have in Sendinblue. And then on the right-hand side, we have the Cine-Q fields. So what we need to do is we need to map the fields from these 2 systems. So the last name will be mapped to last name to first name. And Cine-Q date will be the temp date 01. So that's the field that we're using in the personalized video. And what we also want to map is the Cine-Q trigger, Cine-Q camp trigger. And Cine-Q CRN is also a required field. So there are 3 required fields that need to be mapped: the email address, the CRN, and the first name. So this is pretty much how you map the fields between the 2 systems. If you have certain Sendinblue fields that are currently not available in Cine-Q, you can always just click on this button to create a new custom field in Cine-Q, but we're not going to do that now. Let's go over to push member data, and this is where we can map the Cine-Q fields to Sendinblue. So once again, this push member data is basically mapping the Cine-Q fields. When there is a campaign execution, then the executed data is going to be pushed to Sendinblue. We'll take a look at it later on, so it will make more sense. So the CRN field needs to be mapped to the Cine-Q CRN field. The personalized URL field is going to be mapped to Cine-Q PURL, and the campaign ID is going to be mapped to the Cine-Q campaign ID custom field in Sendinblue. And we can also save this as a preset. In fact, you have to save every single integration as a preset, but the system already indicated that, okay, configuration is going to be saved under Sendinblue push preset. So let's click on save. Now we basically configured the integration for Sendinblue. So the next thing we need to do is we need to go back to our campaign, and we need to go to executions. And over here on the right, we can see a button that enables us to add Sendinblue to this particular campaign. So what it will do is when this campaign is executed, then the data will go to this integration. You can have multiple integrations. If for whatever reason you want to send the data to multiple third-party systems, then you just add them in here. So this is how you set up a trigger campaign in Cine-Q. So now let's go over to Sendinblue and set up our automations. There are 2 automations, or in other words, workflows that we need to set up, which we already have in here. The first one is going to send data to Cine-Q based on certain triggers in Sendinblue. And the second one is going to send out the personalized video URLs via email to the relevant individuals. So let's have a look at how to set up the first one, which is sending data to Cine-Q. So the entry point is that the contact is added to the list, and the list name is called my list. And what will happen is we're going to call a webhook. Now this webhook is actually coming from the integration in Cine-Q. So if we go back to Cine-Q and click on integrations and click on Sendinblue, now if we go to get member data, we can see that this is where we have the webhook URL. This wasn't available previously, but once you set up the field mapping, then the webhook URL becomes available. So we need to make sure that this is pasted into here. And I want to send contact properties to the webhook. We do want to make sure that that's ticked. So click on OK, and it has already been activated. So this is all good to go. The second workflow that we need to have a look at is the send personalized video. So if we click on edit, then we can see that the entry point for this one is a data value change in the Cine-Q campaign ID field. So once that field is set to that particular value, then the audience is going to receive the email that we set up earlier. Now, what we need to make sure is that this value is exactly the same as the campaign ID in Cine-Q. So if we go back to Cine-Q and click on campaigns, click on the Sendinblue campaign ID. Over here on the URL, that's where we can grab the Cine-Q campaign ID, and we need to paste it in here and click on OK. But before we click OK, I wanted to highlight a couple of extra things. Sendinblue doesn't immediately send out the emails based on that particular attribute value change. Over here, we can see that the interval can be set to daily, weekly, or monthly. So what it means is that the system is going to check that field for every single record. If there is a match, then it will send out the email based on the settings in here. If you want to test the end-to-end process, then you need to set the interval to daily and set the when to check time a few minutes after the current time in your time zone. So click on OK. And we can see that this workflow is already activated. So we're pretty much ready to test the end-to-end process by clicking on contacts and creating a new contact. Over here in the upper right, click on add contact. And we're going to fill this out. We do want to fill out the Cine-Q date, as this is going to be our renewal date in our personalized video. So let's set it as, let's say, September 01, 2020. And what we also need to make sure is that we have a CRN number. So let's come up with the numbers, say 78. I know for a fact that we don't have a record in Cine-Q with a CRN number equals 78. And we also need the Cine-Q trigger. Now that Cine-Q trigger field is very important, that it matches what we have as our segmentation rule in our demo campaign. So we're going to copy send me Sendinblue demo into this particular field, and we want to tick that it's going to be created against the my list. So a couple of things I want to highlight. One, that field, the date field, is going to be used in the personalized video as one of the personalized elements. The second is the Cine-Q trigger is going to trigger the actual campaign in Cine-Q. And third, we need to make sure that the CRN field is completed, as well as the first name field. And of course, we have to have an email address. And the fourth one is we need to make sure that this record is going to be added to the my list, because that's what we set up in one of the workflows in Sendinblue. So let's go ahead and click on save. And what we can expect now is if we go back to the automations, we can expect that this record is going to be sent to Cine-Q because it matches the criteria. So let's refresh. And there we go. We can see that the count went from 0 to 1. So if we go back to Cine-Q and click the data and click on members, we type in 78. That was the CRN number that we determined. We can already see that the freshly created record in Sendinblue is already in Cine-Q. And we can see that the Cine-Q cam trigger is set to send me Sendinblue demo, as well as the temp date 01 is set. So if we go back to our campaign, our trigger campaign, we can rightfully assume that it has already been triggered. So it has already executed. If we click on the timeline, then we can see the API calls. We can see that, okay, this particular record has already been sent to Sendinblue, and the PURL field is expected to change to that particular value, which contains the personalized video. So let's go over to Sendinblue and click on contacts. And we can see that the campaign ID has been populated as well as the PURL field. So this particular record is going to go through the second workflow that we set up, which will send out the emails with the personalized video. But because of the way automations work in Sendinblue, what we're going to have to do now is we need to force this record through by using the workflow. So we're just going to paste the URL in here and click on done. So this will push the record through this workflow. The reason why we need to do that is because of the limitations that we have in here. Sendinblue would only check that field at 12 o'clock on a daily basis, and because it's already past 12 o'clock, we're not going to be able to see this happening automatically. So if we go over to our email, we can see that the email has been delivered. And if we click on this image, which has the personalized video URL, then it opens up the video in a Cine-Q landing page. And we can see that the video has the personalization displayed, and we can also see the theoretical renewal date being displayed properly. And you can also include call to action buttons on your video if you wish to, based on your requirements. So we can see that the end-to-end process is working fine. And if you have any questions, please reach out to us via cine-q.com. Thank you for watching.